It's been a long time coming, but Hazbin Hotel is finally back with its second season, and genuinely guys, this entire season is insanely better than season 1, raising the stakes in every way, and I think we can already start to see that with these first 2 episodes. I've already seen the rest of season 2, so today we're going to be talking about the first 2 episodes that premiered in great detail, particularly the plans for the Overlord Vox, as well as getting into my thoughts for the rest of season 2 at the end of my spoiler-free review for the rest of the season. So let's dive into it. But subscribe, because this month it's gonna be Hazbin Hotel videos almost every day of the week here, and you won't want to miss it. Now, season 2 picks up not too long after where season 1 left off. For those who need a reminder, the angels came to hell for a second extermination. Charlie fought back with her team of sinners as well as the cannibal colony, and then they fixed up the hotel with the help of her friends and her father Lucifer. The characters ended the season unsure of their future and thinking that their friend Serpentius had died in battle. But of course, the last thing we saw in season 1 was Serpentius making it into heaven as an angel, proving that Charlie's idea of redemption can be done. Now, for those expecting season 2 to be a kind of direct continuation of season 1, I have to say that as someone who's seen each episode, season 2 feels not just like a second season, but a second arc. Essentially a new story in the same world while still building off of the threads in the original. Season 1 was epic, but it focused mostly on the idea that the angel Adam was the real antagonist, the one pitting the angels and the humans against each other. But with Adam dead at the end of season 1, and that finale already having a great war between the angels and the sinners, season 2 needs to go in a very different direction. This is fun because we're starting to see that Vizipop's plan wasn't just to tackle one direct storyline, but rather hell is starting to feel like a big open world where it has endless things that can go wrong, and a never-ending line of villains that could rise that make the story grow more deep, instead of it all just progressing linearly. With that in mind, episode 1 and 2 of the new season start to flip the script on the original. While season 1 was about hell just wanting to defend itself against the angels and the extermination, season 2 is about how Vox wants to bring the battle to heaven itself and become a god. But we'll get to that soon. To start, the new season of course focused on our main characters, Charlie and her sinners, and even her father who is staying at the hotel now. Though it makes it very clear early on that Vox is going to be taking over this season, with all of the information about the characters from last season being fed to the audience through his reporter, Katie Killjoy. In this opening scene, we get the story of how Charlie and her friends fought back against heaven and killed Adam, but with Katie Killjoy insisting that Charlie may not stop there and come after sinners next. Followed by Katie Killjoy saying that this message is sponsored by VoxTech, which is literally just Vox. Even with all of this bad press, however, we see that Charlie has more people than ever at the hotel because of how she proved that you can kill angels and fight back against them. The problem we find in the episode, on top of Charlie just not being in an emotionally good place over Serpentius' death, is that none of the people at the hotel are really there to get redemption. They saw the battle, they saw Charlie ending the slaughter by fighting back, and that is what they want, not to actually get into heaven. Even getting into heaven is now being treated as more controversial than it was in season 1, as the tensions between the two would mean having sinners going to the place that is trying to kill the others. Because of this, not many people want to stay at the hotel, though Baxter does sign up under the pretense that it's a fascinating experiment that will definitely go wrong. All of this was great, but it was mostly set up for the story about Vox, with all the teasers showing that he will really be invading the show this season. In the season 1 finale, the 3Vs saw the great battle that took place as an opportunity to take control of hell. And in season 2, we see that Vox in particular is still really dedicated to this idea. Early in the episode, we get a musical sequence where Vox and his lackeys work together to convince people disappointed by Charlie's desire for redemption that they should sell out and push Vox's causes instead. And this sets up scenes between the Vs afterwards where they discuss the big plan. But we also see the characters' dynamic shining through, with Vox overshadowing his lackeys. Vox is ambitious, and he doesn't want to just gain more control in hell, but to conquer heaven as well. This isn't seen just as a dictator type move, but also a spiritual one, with Vox claiming he wants to become a god. This makes sense considering that the entity that controls heaven, hell, and thus the earth is the figure we think of as God. And controlling all 3 of these would make Vox the controller of all of creation. But it doesn't end with this sort of figurative comparison. In this scene, Vox and the Vs drop some major lore about Vox's backstory, his life on Earth. We already knew since before the Hazbin Hotel pilot that Vox had a life a bit similar to the one he has in hell, as an important person involved with early TV. Vox would have been one of the earliest people to get into hell with the insight of TV and what it could be used for. So in addition to his natural TV-based sinner powers, he also had the actual experience to implement his ideas there. In this episode, however, Vox alludes to something more he did on Earth. Vox said that he was the leader of an important group, one that he thought of as a special movement, but which Valentino claims was a cult. This is interesting as it seems to allude to the fringe theory, if you will, that our real-life TV and movie industries were run by Freemasons. Freemasonry is legally a charitable fraternity that has been publicly active since the 1700s, and privately active for at least a few centuries before that. This fraternity is often claimed to be a cult due to its initiation system, which is modeled after what we call the mystery school tradition, dating all the way back to ancient Egypt. This was not some fringe outlier in Egyptian society, but rather this was the religious tradition of the Egyptian pharaohs and the high priestly class. This original ritual had been adapted by various groups all over the world for the last 6,000 years, and in some places was referred to as a mystery cult instead of a mystery school, in particular when it was not associated with official governments or churches. This was the case in Greece with the mystery cult of Dionysus, whose ritual was the same as the mystery school of the Greek Eleusinian mysteries, but which wasn't seen as more legitimate because it didn't have the same government oversight. Now, the accusation against Freemasonry is that it has controlled governments and media due to a lot of our founding fathers and heads of industry, in fact, being Freemasons. Freemasonry is also open to the lowest ranking men and is rather easy to join depending on your location, but elites had congregated around more private lodges for some time because it created a private community point to network with others on their level. Sometimes you see jumps in other clubs or movements that celebrities or other industries move to instead of Freemasonry, all for the same basic reason of it providing a private networking point. But where does the cult idea play into Vox here? Well, Vox emphasized in particular how he wants to become a god. But this isn't just figurative, as he's the one who brings up this cult, as Valentino calls it, while talking about his plans. This was a group Vox was a leader of, with an important movement he was trying to push through his medium of television, and while discussing this, we get imagery of Vox's logo. Sometimes we see VoxTech's logo with its V, and sometimes we see it as 3 V's branded together to represent the entire trio. But in every case, it always just looks to me like half of a Freemason logo, which involves 2 intercepting triangles. Even just one of these triangles can be used to allude to Freemasonry, however, as Freemasonry is about building and architecture. Because of that, 2 of its key symbols are the Tower of Babel as well as the Egyptian pyramids, with both being used as representations of the human attempts to rise to heaven, to conquer the known world by constructing these giant buildings all over it. Thus, while the V is a reference to Vox himself, it also seems to purposely be an upside-down pyramid for the sake of this symbolism. To emphasize this connection, we even see Vox's lightning make the shape of the V as soon as he says he wants to become a god. Freemasonry isn't even the only mystery school to use this triangular symbolism, but in all cases, they use an initiation ceremony based on the ancient Egyptian ritual of the pharaohs discussed earlier. This ritual, when performed correctly, is meant to make the pharaoh ascend to the heavens after his death, to make him a part of his ancestor spirit, the Egyptian god Osiris. In doing this, the pharaoh is supposed to become a god himself, controlling the planet and guiding the people from above. When it comes to Vox, the symbolism seems pretty clear. To him, any potential spiritual ideas behind his little cult, as it was referred to, are absolutely lost. And instead, the goal of this group for him was to become a god in the physical sense, to become an entity that grows bigger and bigger to take over the world, and now in death to take over all of creation. The joke is that the Freemasons in television are accused of not just trying to create TV and movies, but using propaganda within them to shape the world into following them and serving under them, making figures like Vox the highest power in the physical world because of the control they have over the population. And while it may seem crazy to think that television could cause an uprising against heaven itself in Hazbin Hotel, we already know that relations between the two are looking terrible based on what we saw in episode 2. Further connecting Vox to the ideas of Freemasonry is the designs of his buildings. In my video about the Hazbin Hotel Season 2 trailer, one fan commented that Vox's building, especially once there was fire wrapped around it, looked a lot like the Tower of Babel. Freemasonry, of course, isn't just a fraternity, but it's rooted in masonry, as we said, the art of architecture and building, giving reason for Vox to have an interest in these big buildings on top of his control over TV. The Tower of Babel is a very interesting symbol for the season, as we know it's going to be about Vox trying to conquer heaven already, which mirrors the story of the Tower of Babel within the Bible. In the book of Genesis, the Tower of Babel is built after the Great Flood, with the descendants of Noah working together to make a tower that can reach the heavens. This angers the Old Testament God, who comes down to the earth and separates the people and gives them their unique languages so they can't work together as one people. If allowed to do so, humans would become as powerful as the gods, reaching the heavens where they dwell with their massive tower, which of course is just a metaphor for the power humans have to conquer and control the world itself. How with enough humans working together, even the entire planet can become their property that they control. The thing is that Masonry, being a fraternity passing down the tradition of architecture, has claimed that its teachings actually come from the Tower of Babel at certain points in its history. This is evident from some of their published writings, such as the History of Freemasonry by Robert Mackey. In this text, Robert Mackey compiled the existing poetry that had been passed down around the earliest Masonic lodges. Each poem is different and dated to a different century, but they all convey the same idea of these teachings of architecture being passed down from previous well-known myths and societies. This is important because, like Egypt, Babylon was one of the earliest cultures to have that fall and rise, or death and resurrection ritual, the way Egypt did with its god Osiris. In Babylon, the story was told with the initiate playing the goddess Inanna, also known as Ishtar, who would get trapped in the underworld and need to be rescued and restored. There is some debate about whether the Egyptian initiations or the Babylonian initiations came first, though the Bible points to Babylon and the Tower of Babel as being the key place where these themes and systems were first explored, a bit before Egypt's later establishment. Either way, both share the same story of death and resurrection, with both cultures having the construction of massive buildings, the Babylonian ziggurat, or the Tower of Babel, and the Egyptian pyramids. All of this connects Vox back to the in-world version of the Freemasons, a movement that others like Valentino called a cult, and which Vox saw as an attempt for humans to construct or elevate themselves above God. Now, Hazbin Hotel, of course, is releasing 2 episodes a week back to back, making it feel like an hour-long show. And so far, we've really only talked about episode 1. I'm going to be diving big into a lot of this stuff in later videos, especially this big beautiful bird, the Speaker of God. So subscribe so you don't miss it, as that video is definitely coming out tomorrow. But for this video, the important thing to take away from episode 2 is just how divided and uncertain heaven is. Episode 1 ended with Emily popping into the hotel to quickly lore dump onto Charlie that Serpentius is in heaven and that redemption is possible. So episode 2 went right into a full-on look into what Serpentius' life has been there. Right now, the angels are in an uproar because they didn't think their loved ones in hell could ever be redeemed, and now they've also learned that they've been exterminating them for years. No one in heaven seems sure of anything, other than of course this new figure, the Speaker of God. This was a character we knew from the Hazbin Hotel playbill, which said that Sarah answers only to the Speaker of God, though not much else was known about her until now. This speaker, however, seems confident that Serpentius is redeemed and that all of this is meant to happen, but that doesn't mean everyone else's fears are misguided. As the Speaker of God explains in this episode, all transgressions happen for a greater purpose, and there are still a lot of horrible things that can happen that will shape where things are going. And personally, I don't trust her, so stick around for my theory video on why this bitch is probably crazy tomorrow. Now, for those wanting more information about the rest of Season 2 without any spoilers, I just want to let you know that it's pretty great. The biggest flaw in the entire thing is that they just don't have enough time to tackle each of these characters in a way that makes it feel like they're all a part of the main plot. But the main plot is so gosh darn epic right up through the finale, and trust me, it's going to be even better than Season 1. For those expecting major answers to some of the show's bigger mysteries, don't get your hopes up, as Season 2 very much feels like its own arc, and there's a lot of seeds planted this year and even last year that aren't going to bloom until Seasons 3 or 4. So try to take Season 2 as almost its own movie, with each of these movies being more about themselves than an overarching endgame that we see in the distance. But if you just can't wait for more of my commentary on these 2 episodes, sign up right here for our YouTube membership program for early access, or over on our Patreon. By signing up today, you get early access to all of my videos in audio form for the next week. This includes that video about the Speaker of God, which gets really big into the lore of Metatron, as well as videos later this week about Abel, Lilith, Lut, Adam, and even Serpentius. And as soon as episode 3 and 4 are released next week, we'll also be putting out all of our commentary on those episodes, and then again for episodes 5 and 6, as well as 7 and 8. But for those who just don't want to sign up, don't worry, all of these videos will be available this week. See you guys then.